Really what this comes down to is underneath all of that is a stance that you're holding that you probably don't realize. And the power for you and the power for all of us is to recognize what is it that I'm unintentionally standing for, and I'm going to shift at such a foundational level this stance so that the conversation, the thinking, the questions, they work themselves out. I didn't even know that. Oh, okay. Oh, it's fine. Totally fine. Oh, I thought you were just gonna kick it off. I thought we were like having a lovely conversation. No, this is good. Okay, this is legit. Okay.
What I was thinking though was, I've been working on this for a long time, trying to figure out like authenticity and saying what's coming to mind for me.
Yeah.
Also like thinking through what I say before I say it.
Yeah.
Because obviously there's got to be a balance there.
Absolutely.
That's one of the things that's not mutually exclusive. You don't just say as soon as it comes to your mind, but you also can't overthink it. Like there has to be a middle ground where you think a little bit, but you also say it as it comes. Like in any case, I'm thinking about like resistance, right? Pushing. What am I pushing against? And I feel like when I speak, I'm just saying what's coming to mind.
Mm-hmm.
That there's like no resistance there. I'm just like letting it happen. But at the same time, that can be problematic.
Tell me more. How could it be problematic?
Just say what comes to mind.
Yeah.
You're not necessarily being considerate of how the conversation's going with the other person, or like you can say things that you could, because you didn't think about the impact that it could have on the other person, it could hurt them. But then that feels like I'm resisting what I'm saying because then I'm having to think about it.
Well, that's interesting because what I'm hearing is that your awareness of your impact is resistance. But what if that's just awareness? Why does it have to be resistance?
Because I feel like anything less than just complete authentic is resistance. That's what I feel like. Like anything other than me just saying it as it comes to mind feels like I'm thinking about it too much. And then if I'm thinking about it too much, like then I'm resisting it as I'm saying. It's not even like. And so it's weird for me. I don't want to resist the conversation. And I know if I overthink what I'm going to say, I'm very much resisting the conversation.
Yeah.
But like not resisting at all can also be problematic, and then I regret it later.
Sure. Let's do this if you're okay with it. Could you give me the specifics of this conversation so we can work it out?
Well, I mean, it happens all the time.
Okay.
Like it's very much like a character thing that I've been working on for like months.
Oh,
like,
tell me more. Yeah, let's deconstruct a real life situation.
What's a good one? Here's a really good example. At work the other day, there was a presentation by the people on campus who talk about like sexual assault and gender identity, and they made a comment that wasn't really well received. They were giving us stats like this percent of women are sexually assaulted, this percent of men are sexually assaulted, and this percent of transgenders are sexually assaulted. Later, in a smaller staff meeting, we were talking about it, and they were like, oh, it was kind of problematic how they talked about transgenders. And I raised my hand, and I said, like, what was problematic about that? I didn't catch it. And then, like, that ended up turning into a really good conversation, because not everyone on our staff knew what was wrong, and I didn't know exactly what was wrong. And then we talked about it, and I realized what was problematic about the language, which, side note, was because you don't just group transgenders together, because there's transgender males, transgender females, whatever. But then later, my boss was like, Casey, the way that you asked that question was problematic, because I know, and right off the bat I'm just like, wait a minute, right? Like this doesn't feel right. That was really authentic for me. I was really vulnerable about what I didn't know. Like I asked an important question.
Right.
And he said, imagine how it would have felt for a transgender person on our staff if someone else on their staff had no idea what their identity meant, and then they just raised their hand, what's the problem with how this really offensive thing was said? What's the problem with that? It's not like you hurt them directly, but it could make them feel a lot less trusting of you and of the staff. I think you could have asked that question better. And so the question for me is like, how can I authentically ask that question without and be considerate of the impact it's going to have on another person on staff. Basically, how can I be considerate but also ask the question authentically? Because I don't want to overthink it, but I also need to be considerate. So there's like this weird middle ground, right? Yeah, I think that's the best example. Actually,
Yeah.
the transgender thing was a big one.
Yeah.
Because I don't think I did something wrong,
Yeah.
but I think I could have asked better. And I'm glad he brought it up, because I would not have picked up on that.
Well, with this ability to reflect right now, how would you have asked it if you could go back in time?
Well, I think probably what would have been better was if I asked what the problem was, but I didn't say like, because I followed up to that question with things like, well, can we define transgender? Can we define cisgender? And like, that's just like really hammering it in to someone on staff. Like, he really doesn't know anything. I think what might have been better was if I like asked one or two people on staff if they knew, maybe talked to my manager about it, and then like a week later in the staff setting, when things weren't tense and when people weren't as worried about knowing or not knowing, I asked again and said, hey, I like looked up these definitions, I talked to some people, I'm still not really clear on it. Because that'd be like a little more reassuring maybe to someone on staff. Or at least like I would have had more context before I asked the question.
Because I love that. I would have had more context before I asked the question. If we were to get curious about what was underneath the reason you asked the question in the first place, what would you say? What's underneath? Why ask the question? So yes, you didn't understand, but go real deep.
Why did I ask the question?
No, why? Well, think about the origin of the question itself. Because to say, I could have had more context before I asked the question. I think there's something underneath this. It's really curious, which is really interesting to me.
What I think you're asking, I'll answer what I think you're asking.
Yeah.
I thought it was important because it didn't feel like anyone in the circle really knew. Like maybe there were a few people who knew what was wrong, but management didn't really say what was wrong. They just said like, hey, something problematic was said earlier, and we wanted to provide you a link to look things up. And I thought like, nobody in the circle knows what's wrong. This needs to be brought up.
Okay.
And like, I'm the dude who most of the time is willing to ask the hard question. I'm willing to take that social beating.
Okay.
And so I was like, okay, I'm gonna ask. It's kind of like math class, 7th grade. It's like if you don't understand, ask.
Right.
Don't let them go further.
Right, but I think you just hit a gold mine here, which is great, because what I heard was, I was assuming that most people didn't know what was wrong, and because of who I am, I take it upon myself to fix that problem and relieve the confusion, because I'm willing to take the social beating. But think about what that is implying, that you've got this assumption that everybody else is confused and that you're going to put yourself out there to ask. So if you go even further back, could you get clarity on the assumption before you ask the question? What would that look like?
I feel like I should have asked people individually outside
Yeah.
of the meeting.
Yeah.
But then, the big thing, like, I feel like I'm overthinking it at that point. I'm resisting what could have been a valuable, authentic question, right? Like, I feel like there was still a fruitful conversation. I felt like a sigh of relief when somebody asked, like, hey, what was the problem? Because then the manager was like, who here knows what was wrong? And like 3 people raised their hand, maybe out of like 20.
Wow.
And it was like, okay, we didn't know what was wrong, right? I was like, okay, maybe. And then it turns out that there is somebody who, like, their identity falls within that category on staff. So it's like, oh, wow, okay. And they talked about it a little bit. And then, like, some other people talked about what was problematic. And I feel like it released a lot of tension. Yeah. We all became more aware. It was a good thing.
Wonderful. Okay, so let me reframe this whole thing. Okay, hold on.
But it was still problematic.
But was it? Because now no, but no, here we is it still problematic, or is everybody in a better place because of the question that you've asked?
Well, I think the staff as a whole is in a better place
Yeah.
because of it. I think we are all more aware
Wonderful.
of how to be accommodating of transgender identities. But still, I thought about it, and it's like, and my boss talked to me about it too, because he was just freaked out. He was like, "Whoa, imagine for that person on staff,
Yeah.
who you didn't know,
Yeah.
had a transgender identity, what it must have been like." And then, in all honesty, to see a straight cisgendered white guy
Wonderful.
asking,
Yeah. Beautiful.
"Well, what does it even mean to be transgender?"
Yeah.
Like, that must just be so trust destroying.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, actually, that's spot on.
Yeah.
Like, if any part of my identity were questioned up front like that by someone else, especially especially if I was a minority and he was or she was in a majority position, and they just totally questioned my identity, didn't even know about it. What's the problem?
Yeah.
I'd be freaked out. I don't want to freak people out, but I want to find an answer, and I want to ask the hard questions when the time is right. So, like, it's an ongoing battle.
I hear it. You know what I'm hearing, Casey. It's your motive is I want to understand what's going on. That's why you asked the question. What did I miss here? I want to understand because I don't want to make mistakes in this area.
Yeah.
So your desire to understand is noble and full of integrity. It sounds like what's missing in this other side of the equation is also, while wanting to understand from this compassionate place, also standing under the reality of everyone else in the room and holding that awareness, and equally wanting to understand the issue, also standing under their reality and posing the question in a way that is safe, that is inclusive, that bridges your lack of understanding and this desire for community, desire for this feeling of belonging and safety. Because that's why you asked it. You asked it because I want to understand what's going on so I don't step on any toes.
Yeah.
Because we're in a community. Because I want to make this safe. I don't want to offend anyone. So I want to understand, what did I do wrong? And I recognize I need to close the gap of my understanding in a way that also honors the ability to stand under their reality and perceive as them. And does this question feel good? It's not resistance to hold that awareness. It's just heightened awareness.
That's where I feel weird about it, though.
Tell me more.
Okay, because if you overthink it, that's definitely resistance.
But what would overthinking be in this case?
To me, it feels like any thinking is overthinking. I feel like if I want to be purely authentic, right? Because people talk about how they just want you to say how you feel. Like, be real with me. Like, be true to yourself. Say what's on your mind. It's like, okay, I'm going to be truly authentic to you. I'm going to say it as it comes. So I feel like I've grown up believing that almost any thinking about what you're going to say is like,
okay,
it's inauthentic.
How can I help you reframe that? Because to say that thinking about what the impact is of my words is overthinking, which is resistance. I mean, how can we reframe that so that you can see that awareness and thinking through the impact of your words and your actions is just a part of this bigger equation of compassion?
So the question for me is, how can I basically, how can I resist the conversation as little as possible without thinking too much? How can I say what's really...
Okay, got it. Try this. When I ask you the question, what do you stand for? What comes to mind?
What I stand for?
It's a big question. There's no right answer here, but what do you stand for?
Like, I'll say in example with my staff.
Yes.
What I stood for was being, I think, pragmatic. Like, I was not okay with the ambiguity of what was being said, and I stood for understanding what the problem was.
Right. Now think about that stance. And I know you, Casey, and I know that stance is not enough because that stance is very I-centric. It's about me. It's about me relieving the ambiguity here. And yes, people will benefit, but this is really coming from an I-centric place. But you don't do what you do, and that curiosity doesn't come to just come because it's within you only. It comes from this place of wanting to create a community. Your stance is bigger than I wanted to relieve this ambiguity. I wanted to be pragmatic. I was standing for pragmatism. You have a bigger stance. I'm standing for harmony. I'm standing for ease. I'm standing for clear communication. I'm standing for connection. I'm standing for harmony, balance in our community. And if you attach and embody and step into that stance, then think about the associated thoughts that arise around that ambiguity now. So sure, there's an ambiguity, but if you're standing for connection with the larger group, what new impulses, what new inspirations come around that question? You follow?
What I like from that is that it's a lot less isolating. Because like, there's very much a risk of, like earlier I said, like, I'm willing to take the social beating for asking the hard question, right?
Yeah.
Like, and I'm hearing that in my head now, and I'm going like, that's a very isolating thing. And if somebody's taking a social beating, that's actually not really releasing tension in a group. That's like increasing tension in a group.
Which is resistance.
Yeah. And so I'm actually like contributing to what I'm not going for,
Mm-hmm.
which I'm like actually really thankful that it worked out. And I didn't get a social beating in this situation. Like, thank God I asked the question. But I like the sound of thinking, or maybe rethinking, am I doing this because I stand for relieving this tension, or because I don't want the group to have to feel the tension?
There we go.
And is it my job solely to release this tension, or is it like, how can I contribute to that as a group effort? Like,
there it is, Casey. And that's exactly what I was asking about. What's underneath this question? Yeah. There's no resistance in standing for harmony. And there's no resistance for standing for connection and standing for clear communication among those that you are interfacing and interacting with. There's no resistance in that. And so if you stand for that bigger foundation, it'll flow. And then you won't see this as overthinking.
but I'd still...
Why do you like arguing for your limitations here, friend?
My limitations and I are quite close. We know each other quite well. I guess what I'll ask for is what's a small way to practice that that you can think of? Or, I mean, not even, I don't need it from you, but like, let's brainstorm.
Let's brainstorm.
Because like, what my boss said was, Casey, I don't want you to stop speaking up. I think it's good that you speak up. In fact, I think that makes you a really unique staff member. We need you for that.
Yeah.
But I need you to...
No, he used the but, didn't he?
Yeah.
He could have used
the
and. He was a butthead. He was a butthead in that moment.
But,
and
so I responded to him and I said, it's not that you need me to stop speaking up, it's that you need me to speak better, right?
So let's talk about, let's frame it through this idea of stance.
Okay.
The question needs to come from a more authentic stance, a more we-centric stance. The stance that you've been holding is, I want to know. I want to solve this problem. I want to relieve the confusion. And chances are people are going to appreciate that. And I'm the one that's willing to do it because There's confusion here, but I want to solve this confusion. What if it's as simple as introducing this new question for yourself? Before you ask the question, you get clear. What am I standing for right now? Am I standing for bridging this gap of this transactional knowledge, or am I really standing for moving this topic to a higher place for all of us?
They could probably feel that too, no question about it. Like my staff, when they hear me, like there's probably a huge difference in how it feels when I say to a staff, with the intent of I want to relieve the tension versus like I'm asking this question so that our group, because I stand for harmony, because I want our group to have harmony. Like there's probably a very different feelings when I do that. So,
Yeah.
Still recording. Okay. Just want to make sure.
Yeah.
But like, it must feel super different to the other people when it's like, I'm gonna take the social beating and ask the hard question versus I feel some tension and I want our group to feel some harmony.
Yeah.
I want there to be harmony. I'm trying to figure out like how can we get there. Like
you're absolutely right,
it feels
Casey.
so much less like combative too.
Well, you know what you're doing? You're shifting your stance from being I-centric, which always prompts individuals to need to protect themselves. Because when we're I-centric, it means I have no awareness of you. And if I have no awareness of you, then that other person's going to be like, well, I better be mindful. I got to protect myself because you aren't noticing your impact on me. So I need to have my guard up. That's what it means to be I-centric. And what you're talking about is shifting from that I-centric perspective to a we-centric perspective. And everything about you shifts. Everything, because at the end of the day, all of us want to feel safe and all of us want to belong. So these incredible sensing apparatuses that are called our bodies and our brain here that processes so much is always looking out for, do I feel safe with this person or do I feel like I belong with this person? And that shift in you from going from I-centric to we-centric is felt. And if someone on the outside looked at you, they probably couldn't see it. But if you were in the room, you could feel it. That's just how us humans operate. So there it is.
And I think about the way I describe this.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask the vulnerable question. I'm going to take a beating for this. It doesn't feel very good. It's like that feels at best, I mean, very just like hard.
It does.
That doesn't feel good. That doesn't feel harmonious. That just feels like, ugh, we're going to get through this. So
Right.
it's like, yes, like I'm getting a question answered, but it doesn't feel good.
Yeah.
And it's not contributing to the group's tension that much. Like,
Yeah.
there's a risk that it's going to take away from that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is like not what I'm going for.
Right.
Not what I'm going for.
So, but I so appreciate this conversation because it started with, how can I be authentic and not overthink, but not have a negative impact on others? Because overthinking to me is wondering what my impact is, but then that gets in the way of me being authentic. And what I'm hearing is that we've just elevated that question to a bigger conversation around what is it that's underneath all that? And what is it that you're ultimately standing for? And what have you been unintentionally standing for? And what could you intentionally reach for that would transform all this that you got going on and truly elevate it to another level? And that's when you get to this part where you're standing, where you're choosing your stance, which is about harmony, which is about connection. When you're choosing your stance like this, then it feels so natural and so resistantless to be asking a question, but also mindful of your impact at the same time, because these two things are one and the same when you stand for we. Not stand for I, but when we stand for we, oh, I've got a good question. And this is about us. So it's not overthinking. It's flow. Yeah?
I think I still feel weird about the overthinking thing, and I know I'm very capable of overthinking for sure. But I'm really happy to see the difference in how these things feel. And I think that's the big indicator for me, right?
I'm going to always come back to it comes back to how you feel, not what you think. It's always going to come back to what you feel, because that is what's accurate. Your feeling tells you where there's resistance or not. Yes. You got this.
And I feel like the overthinking thing, like, again, I mean, we were talking about like mutually exclusive earlier, right? And it's like it's nice to just have like black and white, but I think I can be more comfortable trying to navigate the middle ground between like authenticity and overthinking. I feel more comfortable navigating that if I can always come back to the question of, am I standing for a feeling of harmony with the group? Is that really what the intent of what I'm saying is doing? Does it feel in line with the feeling I'm going for?
Yeah.
Or not even I'm going for, we're going for.
There we go.
Like,
there we go.
How do we feel right now? And is what I'm about to ask feel like it's in line with that?
Beautiful.
That's very doable. I feel like that's a good orienting thing. I can always orient to that. Otherwise, this gray middle ground is still pretty intimidating.
It is great. It can be. And, I love this conversation. I can't tell you how many times I come back to this for myself and for clients, to simply, honestly ask yourself, okay, what am I standing for in this moment? It's so clarifying. Because what I find to be true is that at every point in time, at every moment of our life, we are always standing for something. Like right now, you and I are having this conversation and we're recording it. So I could be unintentionally standing for doing this right. Or I could be standing for not making a mistake. Or I could be standing for not sounding stupid. Or I could be standing for sounding smart. Or I could be standing for getting this done on time so we can head to lunch. Yeah. There's so many things I could be standing for. And for most of us humans, we let that unintentional stance dictate our lives. And so then we wonder, why is it that I'm stepping on these people's toes? Why is it that these things are happening? Well, it's not because I'm ignorant. It's just because I'm standing for something I don't mean to be. It's simply been out of my awareness. And so what I need to do is be more intentional about how I navigate life and choose what I'm standing for. I'm having this conversation with you because I stand for elevating the consciousness of this planet by having better conversations about things that are good. I am standing for joy. I'm standing for connection here with you and the rest of the world that chooses to listen in or watch these things that we produce. When you choose that, then it frames you up. And it determines the thoughts you think, the feelings you have, and the words that come out of your mouth, and then thus the actions. People can pick up on that. So the practice here is to just get more curious. What is it that I'm standing for? And if to do this, all you have to do is care more about how you feel. Because if you're feeling great, keep going. But if there's ever those choice points, or ever those moments where you're like, and you maybe start getting into overthinking mode, that's when you stop, and that's your cue to ask, okay, what am I standing for? What could I stand for? Whew, boom. Reorients you in a moment and sets you on a new path.
That's a whole other episode. Okay, no, for real, because I feel like we condemn ourselves for feeling bad about things.
Yeah.
All the time, right?
Yep.
It's like, God, I feel, I just feel terrible about how I look, or like I feel like I'm never on top of my shit. Like,
totally.
Wow, like I just hate myself, right? And it's
totally.
Like, okay, if you feel bad, like, yes, that sucks. We're not gonna try to convince you that like feeling bad is supposed to be good. But you don't have to hate yourself because you feel bad. Like, it's
right.
just an indicator that there's some like stop and reflect.
Beautiful. Like, you got some wonky thinking in the background.
Something needs to.
And if we were to come exactly right. And if we want to make this simple, we could always go back to you're standing for something that doesn't make sense in that moment because you feel bad. So if you look down at yourself and you're like, oh man, I'm not looking good. Well, then what would you be standing for that's not serving you in that moment?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You're clearly not standing for health because you're in tip-top health. You're clearly not standing for freedom of movement because you are super agile in the moment. You're standing for your image. You're standing for being approved of by others.
And like, I
right?
can condemn myself for that too. I'll be like, God, like,
Yeah.
I feel so self-conscious. Like, I'm such a superficial, like, jerk. Like, look at this. I'm so superficial. You suck. And it's like, wait a minute. If I feel self-conscious, instead of like shooting on myself, I could go, wait, okay, something feels bad. I'm feeling some resistance. Let's pause.
Yeah.
Evaluate. But I don't do that.
Well,
I just get
how about
this,
this?
like, condemning
Well,
stuff.
but now that we've had this fabulous conversation about it, now you can start.
I can start. Yeah.
Use those moments as cues. Oh, I'm having a yucky feeling right now. Oh, I'm having a really tumultuous thought. Wait, that's my cue. That's my cue to get curious. What am I standing for right now that's causing this to be the case? And what could I stand for that would allow me to transform this right now? Mm-hmm.
What could I stand for that just feels right? Like,
Bingo.
big one, because this doesn't feel right.
No.
For sure.
You know, in my experience, it doesn't feel right if we're entirely eye-centric. And when we are eye-centric and we don't realize it, that's when we feel a little wonky. It's almost always when we move beyond the I-centric to the we-centric stance that it's like, oh, okay, this is so much better.
This is totally another episode. Oh my gosh. We do a whole thing on that too. That's so important.
Well, make a note. We'll do it for the next recording.
No, but I'll throw this out. One comment.
Okay.
Self-help is really cool. I like the idea of self-improvement. But I think what's kind of problematic about it is like, or one thing that's problematic is that it's very isolating. It's like, you know, the rest of the world doesn't believe in you, you know, but if you know it's right, just do it. And it's like, that's cool. Like, I'm going to stand for what I believe in, and I grow up standing for what I believe in. But it's also a very isolating belief. And like, I'm on, you know, year 2, I'd say, of like really deeply involving myself in self-improvement, reading self-help books, motivational speeches, whatever. And I've been watching motivational speeches for like 5-10 years. And I'm seeing the effects of it now. Like, you have this residual belief that self-improvement is like an only you thing. You know, there's no we-centric element to it at all. And I don't even look at the words self-improvement, right? It's
Well
like,
said.
It's
Really good
eye-centric,
observation.
right? It's
Yeah.
like, as I say this now, I'm like, oh yeah, self, eye-centric. But it's a very isolating thing. And I, as someone who's really involved myself in this, I'm on the other end going, what the hell? Like, that, wait a minute, other people are important too. Like, I can't go throughout life just assuming the rest of the world doesn't believe me. Like, no, they've got things that work too. It's different than what you're doing, but it works, and you just don't understand it. And it's like, you can stand for we. You don't always have to do this eye-centric stuff.
There we go.
That's okay, but that's my one comment.
I love it.
Literally, we could talk about this for like a whole thing.
Oh my God, I love it.
And
But this is,
gotta wrap up, too.
we can't, yes, let's wrap it up. But yes, so this is, so if we were to discern a theme and a valuable takeaway from this conversation, what would it be?
Are you standing for what feels right? Or are you standing for something else?
Are you choosing your stance? Or is your stance choosing you?
Oh shit. That's one way. Or, I like this. Let's bounce off of, you know, something, if it doesn't feel right, you should take that as a chance to evaluate what's going on and see what you stand for.
Bingo.
I think that was the big lesson for me this time.
Yeah.
It's like, if something feels off, it's not wrong. You're not wrong, but you should take a step back and evaluate.
Right. Oh, I love this. And yes, and in this, we also can reframe that feeling off, you know, which we typically want to punish ourselves for, and say, oh, wait, no, this is just an indicator. This is just a signal. It's a cue. It's a cue that I've gotten a little off track. And so instead of getting upset about me having this feeling and these thoughts, it's a cue. It's a loving cue to say, whoa, okay, let me just get curious right now.
Yeah, let's figure this out.
Yeah.
I don't, that'd be a nice habit to develop, where instead of going down this whole like thing of, oh, condemning yourself,
Right.
like instead just not even letting that happen.
No.
And just going to, okay, what's wrong?
Right.
Instead of the whole,
It's a navigational tool.
we need to talk about that.
Okay.
That's a big one.
So I hope you're going to write all these things down because I'm not. Good, but this is a good thing. I love that. So I think we've summed it all up. You said it beautifully. And what I love is that we've built this bridge between I want to be authentic and I want to speak my mind because I know my heart's in a good place. But somehow something's missing. And I want to close the gap. So I want to be authentic and I want there to be no resistance. I don't want to overthink, but I don't know what to do. And what we did was we uncovered in this conversation that really what this comes down to is underneath all of that is a stance that you're holding that you probably don't realize. And the power for you and the power for all of us is to recognize what is it that I'm unintentionally standing for, and I'm going to shift at such a foundational level this stance so that the conversation, the thinking, the questions, they work themselves out. You don't need to effortfully navigate your questions and your conversations. You take a good, honest look at who you are underneath and what you're standing for, and you choose the stance that really is you, which is that we-centric you, because all of us are we-centric. Yeah.
I think what was cool too was we did a little bit of like navigating of like, does this really feel right? Or does it, because I didn't realize until I said it to you and you said it back to me like, oh wow, this actually felt really tense for me. This sounded very like not we-centric at all.
Yeah.
I think that was a cool part of what we did today too.
Awesome.
It was good.
Nice job. Nice
How
job,
do we
friend.
wrap this up? I guess, okay.
I think what we summarized, which is good. Well, Casey, I've thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. And from the bottom of my heart, thank you for sharing so openly and honestly and vulnerably about you and your life so that we could really take a good look and tease out some practices and some thoughts and some higher level wisdom here to live by.
I'll throw this out there to anyone on the camera. I know you can't see me, you can probably hear me. Thank you for being here. I know I kind of just went with something that's a little vulnerable, maybe even uncomfortable. I know we were talking about identity stuff here. Thanks for listening. I definitely got something from this. I hope you got something from this.
Well, I got something from this, as always.
So I hope all of us
Give me
got something
5.
from this.
Yes.
This
Go,
is a
friend.
great conversation, at least for us. Between Amy and I, this is a great conversation.
Great
Hopefully
conversation.
You, on the other end of the camera, got something too.
So to make it about you, something to ask yourself is, you meaning the listener or the reader, not you, Casey. Let's be clear. So to turn the spotlight on to those here that are listening, I would love to pose the question, what would it look like if more of that internal dialogue turned in the direction of, what is it that I'm standing for right now? Am I standing for being right in this argument with my husband? Or am I standing for harmony? Or am I standing for being right?
Yeah.
Or am I standing for harmony? I'm standing for being right, darn it. Asking yourself honestly, what is it that I'm standing for? And then see if you could pivot and step into a stance that really does transcend the situation. Yeah.
I would add on that too. That in reverse, another thing you could try is if something feels wrong, if there are parts of your life that feel off or hard, maybe think about, am I standing for the wrong thing in this situation?
Yeah.
That's another opportunity.
That's exactly it. Use those feelings, use those situations as cues to get curious and really identify what is it that I'm standing for, and then take action. What do I want to stand for? Yeah. So there we have it.
Yeah. All right.
Good job. All right. Well, have a great rest of the week, friends. I'm hungry. Let's go get lunch.
Sounds good.